there, gang. Got a Harmony Rocket, Def Leppard style. Let's get the rock out of here! This one is an H54. The Rocket series debuted in 1959. Kind of a big boy version of the Stratotone idea. They started off with a standard brown sunburst, and then in the early 60s they switched over, in large part I think, to this red color, which often ages to a kind of tomato soup looking hue. There were a number of models: single pickup, 3 pickup, some with vibrato tailpieces, dual cutaways. There's the H59 that had that ridiculously long line of control knobs that hugs the whole perimeter of the lower bout. That one's visually very memorable. I haven't found the date stamp on this one yet. I suspect it's probably later 60s. I don't know. We'll see if I can find it. It's got a couple of nice de-armament gold foils in it. The story behind this one, it's from a player who passed away, and the family believes that they're eventually going to sell it, so they want to get it fixed up and cleaned up and looked after. I can tell this thing spent a lot of time outside a case. During an age when like 60% of the population smoked, it's something you contend with if you're interested in vintage gear. A lot of it's going to smell funky and be kind of sticky with residue. It's the same with any old stuff. I mean, if you collect paintings from the 19th century, you expect that you're going to have a layer of coal dust on them and whale oil lamp soot on them, you know. It's just, there's a lot of cleaning to do. And this one has domestic dispute damage. No kidding. This is a retribution break, using the old Pete Townsend battle axe maneuver. So we're going to have to glue that up. Where to begin an assessment on something like this? These are some very old strings. Not quite up to pitch, but the neck seems reasonably straight. Actually, the high E is loose, and yeah, the tuner does not seem to be functional. Let's check that out. Well, we can never be truly sure about these things, but I think that might have something to do with it. I think this screw is basically there to hold its place until a proper screw can be found. Alright. I plugged it in briefly on arrival and couldn't get a signal out of it. So either the jack wire is loose, or more likely there's just a buildup of oxides on the contact. They need to be cleaned up. Let's clean the jack. People always ask what kind of contact cleaner I'm using, and the answer is it probably doesn't matter. Many times I'm flushing the parts out as much as deoxidizing. So you can go to any auto parts supply store and look up electronics contact cleaner. Up here it might be Canadian Tire. In the States it could be AutoZone, Napa. Hopefully no one swiped the applicator straw. Seriously, have you ever tried to price the little red straws for these things? It'll blow your mind. Deoxit is the brand name that's one of the best known and probably best formulas out there. But it's really pricey. Like I said, I'm spritzing a whole bunch to wash out a pot or something and freeing up. Using deoxit would be a waste. You know, so I'm just going to scrub away in here with a cotton swab. If it's really bad, I might get in there with a small file or even sandpaper on a stick just to sort of scuff off the surface of the little spring there that's part of the jack. Okay, got the gloves on. I'm going to scrub it for about half an hour. I'll start off with naphtha, which is lighter fluid. In some places I might even use a little Goo Gone, and perhaps even my finest grade of buffing compound to really cut through it if it's necessary. I'm going to put on some copyrighted tunes to pass the time, so future Ted, find something to voice over this, please.
Thanks, Historical Ted. I'm kind of stoked. Someone asked me recently where I learned to produce videos, and I hope it's clear that I'm a total and complete amateur in this regard, but something came up that brought some things to mind. Because last night, YouTube suggested a video from a person who is probably as big an influence on what I've been doing here as anyone. Richard Raffin. He's a woodturner in Australia, formerly of England, and in the 80s and 90s he wrote some books and made a number of videos for Fine Woodworking's Taunton Press. Anyway, they were just engrossing videos. Raffin has this intensely dry sense of humor, which is so dry it kind of gets lost on a lot of people. The pacing, the editing, the ethic behind it must have had an influence on me, but he's semi-retired now and he started making videos again. And it's fun to watch someone with a lifetime of experience, so I can identify with those people who get a kick out of watching me fix stuff. I'm the same way. Dirty fingerboard here. Pretty much the dirtiest. Now what if I told you those grooves aren't actually in the wood of the fingerboard? The board's fine. Those are just furrows in the grunge. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm showing you this. Oh man, it's a glamorous profession. Eventually I'm sanding the last of it off with 320 grit paper. And for the body, some automotive polish. There's a bit of a mystery. At some point someone tore up a piece of paper into confetti and tossed it inside the guitar. It took a while to pick it all out. Now these turned out to be directions, and I'm now in possession of an ancient and abominable book containing certain words within that I just dare not speak. The frets were actually in pretty good shape. They just needed a bit of a polish. Put on a little drop of oil because it was stripped pretty dry after all that cleaning. For some reason the neck feels slimmer now. You can see the deep cross-grain scratches in the rosewood. It's typical of harmonies in the 60s and 70s, and I don't know what that's about. Because it looks like 120 grit, which would be pretty brutal, even for just dressing frets and stuff. Getting rid of them, unless you're going to do a refret, it's just probably not going to happen. Because by the time you've scraped or sanded through to the bottom, you'd end up with a scalloped board. So we'll glue up this crack. We're kind of lucky this time. It wants to go back into alignment pretty easily. Oftentimes the sides will yawn in opposite directions, and you have to do this push and pull thing, trying to get them straight. I'm using Titebond style glue. It's a good open time because there's going to be a lot of clamping. And I trust it. You could use hide glue or fish glue, but in this case I'm not sure if they'd give you any better results, really. I'll try and clean off as much squeeze out as I can. It's difficult when the clamps are on. There's a whole bunch of spool clamps. And when employed as a blunt force object, this kind of thing can happen as well. What do you think? Should we put some glue in there too? Okay. First I'll pump it full of glue, and then I'll tie it up. 55-year-old guitar. How much touch-up does it need? Well, this one little bare spot bothered me, because there was nothing else around it. But really, it makes no sense trying to repair every little ding on something like this. It's unnatural. I found a likely donor for the tuner's screw. And here's something for all the guitar techs out there, and why you sweep the floor before undertaking an operation like this, because now I've got to go searching. Didn't take long to find. I put a little oil on the bearing surfaces. I discovered, working on a similar guitar in the fall, that this particular red lacquer is extremely sensitive to thin superglue for some reason. It immediately faded out, completely. So I'm just using some water-based pore filler in what's left of the crack here to seal it up. Then I'll use some fine micro mesh to clean off any residue, soften any sharp corners left on the lacquer. I hit it with auto body polish as well. The top surface of the bridge is a little inconsistent. I think I should probably sand that down with the radius block and re-slot it. This thing, as it stands, has very narrow spacing. It's like 47.5 millimeters. That's due in part to just having a narrow neck. But in this case, we've got another one of these guitars where the frets are cut short of the binding, and then there's also a pretty long bevel on their ends there, so it moves in quite a ways. There's not very much room to maneuver. Usually by measuring the width of the neck at the 12th fret, you can sort of figure out what the optimal string spacing at the bridge will be. The other thing to take note of is the spacing of the pickup screws. In an ideal world, the strings will be centered on each of these. In practice, often they'll vary a little bit, depending on the model and the string length and just how it was set up. And again, just citing this, I think probably 48 millimeters is as much as you would ever expect to get out of a saddle spacing on this guitar. It's a 12-inch radius sanding block, and I've marked the previous string spacing on a part of the bridge which is not going to get sanded off. We'll just measure the string spacing here. 9.5 millimeters is about 374 thousandths. And this actually seems to be graduated slightly. So the bass strings are farther apart than the treble, and overall it looks okay. So I'll use that. I will file this slightly narrower as I've reduced it in height. It's actually widened the top of the bridge. And I can also do a little bit of rudimentary intonation work. I can backfile the B a little bit, maybe take the lower strings back a little farther. That'll help get rid of some of this damage that's on the A string there. Don't need huge grooves. Just a little nick is enough. Basically just cleaning out the dust. The question arises, if I'm setting up a guitar I intend to sell, what string gauge should I use? And to my mind it should be 1046. Most players, like 90% of the players out there, will be happy with that. An action height, somewhere around 4/64ths, 16th of an inch, 62 thousandths, 1.5 millimeters. That's average. I mean, if you're setting up something that's obviously a shredder guitar, yeah, you'd go lower. But for a vintage thing like this, 4/64ths is just about right. And we have to reckon with the fact that whoever does eventually buy this guitar, it likely won't be their very first electric at this stage, and they'll likely have their own setup likes and requirements. So setting things for average is the best way to go. Okay, it's all together and ready to play. I was talking with the owner about the value of these things, and you know I'm not a walking blue book, but I noticed the trends. There was a time 15 years ago when people would buy one of these just to take the pickups out of them, because the gold foils at that point were getting popular. Now the whole instrument seems to be worth saving. You know, prices have gone up a bit. They're not rare, these things, but as the collector's value of the best known guitars of the 1960s are now completely out of the range of many players or would-be collectors, the budget brands are the last thing left. So, you know, someone might still be able to put together a collection of a dozen variants of Harmony Rockets and, you know, have fun with that. Because these weren't ever considered top of the barrel, many have spent years banging around against stuff in a closet and they're far from mint. It's only the super prime examples that really gather the good money. And with the repaired brakes, this one is always going to be a player's grade, whatever that means. So we have to temper expectations in terms of market value. But a lot of these are really fun to play, if not underrated in terms of sound. You know, you could do worse.